Are we live now? Okay, there we go. Good afternoon, everyone. It's actually the eve of Thanksgiving in the United States. I know not all countries, I think we might be the only country that celebrates this in any event. Wednesday, November 24th. And this is episode 54 of Cocktails and Pajamas. Welcome. We are glad that you're here. And if you're going to watch later, that's okay. Give us a shout out. Let us know that you're watching, and we welcome you. So, so we were kind of on the fence about kind of back and forth whether or not we were going to do this, and then we decided, yeah, let's give our viewers something to a way to connect with us, a way to maybe connect with each other. Maybe you will be feeling a lot of the things that we have been talking about and experiencing. And so, yeah, let us start. Are you good to start? Do you want to you want to check in first? You need a minute. Okay. So, let's see. As I shared last week, that was last Wednesday was the anniversary of my father's death, 14 years, I think. And so, interestingly enough, Thanksgiving for me has taken a very different kind of shape over the last many years, and especially the last 2 years, because I don't have family here on the East Coast. And so last year I was with some friends, and this year I'm choosing to spend it with myself. And so I've prepared some things that I like, because I'm not really a fan of turkey. I just never have been. I mean, I'll eat it because it's been prepared, but I'm okay without it. And so I did a little bit of food preparation today. I'm doing a little bit more tomorrow. And then I've been invited to a friend's for dessert tomorrow evening. That's also on the fence. I'll see how I'm feeling in the evening, and if I want to go, I'll go. So yeah, and then my sister reminded us yesterday. So my father had a military burial, and then we had a memorial service at our home church. And yesterday was the burial of his ashes. And where he's buried is probably one of the most beautiful cemeteries truly in the country. I don't know if you've seen a military base cemetery. They're gorgeous. They're so beautifully kept, and there's a lot of money put into them. Let me just say that. Yeah. And well spent money, because these are men and women who have fought for our country, who have given us, allotted us freedoms that we would not have as Americans in this country. So thank you to those that have served. I think that's my check-in for now. I think that's my check-in. Yeah.
Thank you, my love. Thank you for starting us off with something so meaningful and so tender, right? As I imagine that many in our audience have an empty seat at some table, potentially, or several empty seats as the years go by. So um yeah, I think I'll check in there too, being home with my mom in Cali, and it being a Thanksgiving without my father as he's deployed, and a similar sense of it feeling different, obviously for different reasons, and an awareness that I think when I have these sort of moments in my life, I become far more aware that other people might be having these moments. That's a bit of a gift to me. There's compassion that comes through as well. Like, oh, this feels different. I miss this person. They're not here. For those of us who have military families, right? We talked about like there is an empty seat at the table, and it might be for a really good reason. And it might still feel sad, right? Or bittersweet at the least during the holidays. Um, I'm finding it interesting to be in a different constellation, family wise, having more time with my mom, having what is like really just us time versus like the three of us time, and how that's different, and how I'm showing up maybe differently in that container. And also the parts of me that are like awkward and a little uncomfortable, trying to like feel into a new paradigm. Um, so yeah, I really appreciate you bringing in like that's up for some of us, and particularly feeling really touched by just your different days of anniversary for your father, right? Like there's his passing, and then there was another day that you all, I'm imagining, was it a family moment, the spreading of his ashes? Okay. Yeah. And I'm curious where or why or how, what that looked like. If you're open to it, totally cool if you're not.
Yeah. So there's so for those of you who don't know about a military burial, um, everyone, because of space and because there are so many people, um, everyone is, I would say the majority of people um, are cremated. And so, there are these tiny boxes of ashes. So, and then on the ground, and it's very well organized, the cemetery is very well organized. So we know exactly where my father's placard is, and we know it's literally, we drive in and we can go right there because we've been there many, many times. And so what, because I had never been to a military burial before, a service like this. And for me, I think the most meaningful, because it's very, how do I want to say, uh, what's the word I'm looking for? Oh my gosh, I'm stuck again on another word, but it's tradition. There are a lot of traditions, military kind of traditions that they do. So there's the 21 gun salute. There's the folding of the American flag. There's the presenting of the American flag. There's the acknowledgement of the family. There's the acknowledgement of the male. Like if there's whoever the sort of the now the head of the family, which would be my mother and my brother, even though he's not the oldest. So that's kind of how, kind of patriarchic a little bit, but that's what they did, which was fine. Um, and and then and I think they played taps when it was over, which was really beautiful. Um, and I would say it's maybe 15 minutes, a very short service, because they're doing these almost around the clock. Like there are just people literally, because people dying every minute of every day. A lot of them are military, and so it's happening all the time. And I would say there were about half military folk in attendance and half that weren't, just regular family friends. Um, and it was really lovely. And it was a really cold morning. I remember it was freezing cold, and I thought, why am I wearing a skirt? Like with bare leg, just like, why am I wearing, why? Anyway, so yeah. And for me, I think the most meaningful, like I said, was the folding of the American flag and then presenting it to my mother. Was really very emotional and very touching, and yeah, sweet. And then that was Friday after Thanksgiving, and Saturday is when we had his memorial service at our home church, and my brother and I both gave eulogies. We wrote our own script, and I wanted to share my story of my father, my relationship with my father, not only as his daughter, but also as one of his daughters. Like I felt like I represented my sisters as well, and what it meant to be a daughter to this father. And so that was actually a lot of fun for me. It was a really great exercise in it forced me to look at myself in a deeper way, it from a very different perspective than I normally would, because I was writing this eulogy as the daughter of my as a daughter, Heidi, of my father. And I've, when else would one do that? Yeah, so it was really special.
Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm hearing like a different kind of awareness in writing the eulogy, and a different perspective to be writing from. I hadn't really thought of that, but it makes sense. And then there's what I've experienced, at least with grief, is just such sincerity,
Uh-huh.
right? Sort of the ego is a little bit dropped, and there's a more earnest, sincere place I've often found myself
Uh-huh.
inhabiting in grieving times. Yeah, sounds really beautiful too. The ceremonial approach.
Uh-huh.
And I know that about the military, these meaningful ceremonies around it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. Thank you for asking and inquiring, because I don't know that I've shared that before. So that feels really special. Yeah.
Yeah, it feels special over here too.
Mm, thanks.
Mm. So I'm wondering, and we had a little chat yesterday and had some what felt like very meaningful pieces coming up for both of us around the holidays in general, and recognizing like, wow, our audience might be struggling with or moving through some of these similar things, just a shared humanity that we have. Um, this idea of like the things that get stirred up around the holidays, right? Expectations, dysfunctions, old unresolved things,
Yeah.
right? And then the the expectation of everyone to kind of just swoop in and have a festivity
Uh-huh.
together,
Yeah.
to me feels like a cocktail for some problems.
Yeah. Oh, for sure.
Like if I was an alien watching this going, wait, so you all have these triggers around each other, no one's talked about, no one's cleaned up. Not to say this is everybody.
Right.
And you don't feel seen by your family, but you're going to show up to dinner and be more not seen.
Yeah.
Like, ugh.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. What
And
comes up for you when I say that? I'm curious.
so there are several things that come up for me. And the one thing that I'm thinking about is this expectation that a lot of people have of what let's just take Thanksgiving since it's tomorrow, right? Of what Thanksgiving should be, right? And I would say to every family, to every person, it's probably different. And oftentimes, because of tradition, we have maintained this tradition through decades and sometimes generations. And I'm going to say humans in general can really get stuck in that. And if we're stuck somewhere, we might want to look at that. Right? We might want to look at that, because things aren't always going to be the same. Even though we might want them to be the same, or we might want the feeling to be the same, it just never is from year to year. And so I was listening to Glennon and Abby this morning, and they were talking about the holidays and whatnot. And, Glennon talked very openly about her eating disorder.
Mhm.
And I'm, and I think about my niece who is, I think she's a vegan or whatever, vegan or vegetarian, pretty new. Like she's pretty new to it. And so it's not the niece that I talk about more so than it's the other one. And I'm like, oh, I wonder how she's managing that.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Because her family is a very meat eating family. They just are. And so I'm curious, for those who are doing things differently, how are you doing? Are you speaking up for yourself? Are you allowing yourself, are you giving yourself permission to be who you are? Because like I said just a few moments ago, every situation, every year is different, even though we might want it to be the same. There are going to be changes. They might be subtle changes and they might be more obvious changes, but there are going to be changes. And so I think that it's really important for those who may not be used to speaking up for themselves, who just kind of go along for the ride. It might be time to put on the big girl pants, put on the big boy pants, whatever you want to, and just be like, okay, I've got my back and I'm going to speak my truth because this is really important to me. Just because nobody else celebrates this, or just because nobody else understands this or can see my point of view, doesn't mean that my point of view or my belief system or my standards are not valid. And family is family is one of those really crunchy things, because we're family, because we were by blood, we were born into, or we were adopted into this family, right? And so because we're family, oftentimes we're afraid to speak our truth. And I think that, and trust me, I get that. I've been there. I've been there a million times. And I'm also getting a lot better at speaking up for myself than I was even 5 years ago. Because there's just some shit I won't take. I just won't put up with it anymore because I'm worth it. I'm worth speaking up for myself. Yeah.
I love that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you too for naming something I hadn't considered in the sense of like, particularly people who are traveling to be together, like they're living these very different lives, or just their own lives, their own way, their own rhythm, habits, meals, right? Meal plans. And there is this big shift of like, now you're all coming into the mm, like group bubble, the collective bubble
Right.
that has its own expectations, right? And this word that I love is like differentiation. Have you differentiated from your family? Have you individuated? Right? Some people may not have, just given whatever kind of family structures were in place. They might have just gone with the flow growing up, right? And not differentiated as a person, whether that's being a vegetarian, whether that's being of a different religion or political, stance, whatever. So all that's coming into and to the dinner table, right? And I love that you use the example of the vegetarian, because I was a vegetarian and for the most part, like many years have been. And I remember, those kind of holidays as a 16-year-old, like in an Afghan family where it's like shish kebabs and kofta and all the other things. And having to have those conversations where someone's like, "Hey, have some of this." And you're like, "Oh no, I'm a vegetarian." La 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 la. Okay, well, you're not gonna have the beef. Have some of the lamb. No, no. How about the fish? No, no.
Yeah.
Chicken, right? People like trying to understand, being like, "Well, what are you gonna eat then?" Like all of their values being projected, right? It's a lot of swimming through stuff
It
in
is.
that regard. And differentiation to me is I can have sense of belonging here and be myself. versus in order to have sense of belonging, I kind of have to contort myself to kind of follow the pack. And I'm curious for our audience if that resonates for you, like, oh, I might have some more differentiation to do.
Right.
Or maybe I will challenge myself tomorrow to differentiate like 1% more. Like, as you said, you're better at it now than 5 years ago. It doesn't have to be one fell swoop, right? It could be, did I speak up a little more than I'm comfortable
Yeah.
speaking up?
Yeah.
Do I kind of tell, racist uncle that's not cool,
Right.
right? Like, whatever.
Right.
Do I speak up how I would want to speak up? And you make a really good point. Where else in our lives are we stuck with a bunch of people that are different from us
Yeah.
and not just be like, namaste, like we're not friends anymore,
Right.
right? When friendships are outgrown, we leave. When we can't find common ground with someone, we often step away.
Mhm.
And family also has this expectation that no matter what, you do stick it out. I'm not a really huge proponent of that.
Neither.
Because sometimes, as you said, you're worth it enough to speak up or walk away,
Yeah.
right? I'm like, that's not that thick to me. Because you still want to have goodness and connection and well being. And if that's not happening, then perhaps you choose new family as it relates to who you circle with.
Yeah.
And I know that's not easy, but
It's not. It's not easy.
mhm,
Um, and I would also say it's important. And even if someone recognizes that's what they need, if they can't do it, I think recognizing is probably it's at least 50% of getting through it.
mhm,
And then maybe 6 months down the road they can begin to consider having a conversation or consider separating or dividing out, right?
mhm,
And then a year later, maybe they're ready to, maybe with some support from other people, they're ready to individuate and ready to divide out, whatever that process
mhm,
is. Um, um, yeah, there are just so many situations where, yeah, so many situations where people are dealing with different things, and I really do get and understand that we want it to be hot cocoa and cookies. Like I can't, right? I get it.
yeah.
I get it, and the reality is it's not for a lot of people,
Mm,
it's just not. And so um, let's have, for those of us who are in healthy situations and are doing the holidays as well as we can and getting through them, um, let's have compassion for those who can't and who are really struggling, because it's this time where we are, I want to use the term forced, but we're kind of forced to be with like we're forced to be with family. I mean, I've had conversations with people where they're like, well, I got to be with my family. I'm like, do you really? Do you really need to, or are you doing it because you haven't found another way, or you haven't had another invite, or whatever, yeah, it's a conundrum. It's a real challenge to try to kind of work through that.
mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's also, you reminded me of something in what you were sharing about, like, we can stay and we can try to grow, right? Or we can step away. I think sometimes people feel like they'd be seen as the bad guy if you're like the person that's not coming
Yeah.
and everyone else is. But if you're really like, gosh, that's not the way I envision my day,
Uh-huh.
no thanks. Um, Being okay with that discomfort of maybe feeling like you're the one ruining it, right? And then on the other end, like if you do stay and choose to be with your family and there's differences, I don't find that differences are the issue. I find often in relationships, it's how we treat each other because of the differences. That's the issue. Um, so then it's like, wow, can you be okay that someone else's values are different than yours? They are behaving and acting according to their values, which may look very different than yours. But it's sort of, my mama says this all the time, not everybody's you.
Right.
But I'm just like, what the fuck? Why would somebody do it that way? Or, you know, like that was not great communication, all my standards, so to speak, that are informed by my values. And just the reminder, even at that Thanksgiving dinner table, not everyone's like you, kind of makes the room a bit rich and colorful. And wow, what about that muscle of loving somebody, even though you can't even fathom why they're thinking the way they are?
Right.
That's quite an edge stretch.
It is an edge stretch. Yeah. Yeah.
Because it's like the only thing that's wrong sometimes is me being like, why doesn't this person value the same things? They're not really wrong, they're just different.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, how can we love anyway?
Yeah.
And if and if we're really having a hard time with it, the piece I'm also holding is then maybe how you relate to those people changes,
Hmm.
right? Maybe you don't relate to them as often
Hmm.
or in as many ways. Maybe you do pull back a little.
Yeah.
But just kind of being like, if you can't change them, then only thing you can really change is how you choose to relate to them,
Yeah.
which is work, as we know.
It's a lot of work, and it takes a lot of really deep digging into oneself.
Hmm.
Um, and I don't remember when I learned this or how I learned this, but I remember, I mean, it was certainly in some therapy that I was doing. Um, but I remember hearing, a professional say to me, you realize you can't change that person. And it was the first time someone had said those words to me, and I was like, what do you mean? Of course I no, that's not what do you mean? And they said to me, the only person you can change is yourself and the way that you think about them. And I'm like, damn, they're
Yeah.
right. That's so true. And so which I would say I think at that point was kind of like the beginning of my perfection recovering journey. God, it's still happening. Like I
It's
still,
still
yeah,
happening. Me
it's
too.
still happening. I'm still in that journey of recovering. I think I'll always be recovering from perfection and my idea of what perfection is for other people.
Yes.
God,
And if you're
oh,
a relational being and other people aren't being as relational, we're going to be sensitive to that.
yes,
Right. And it's like also recognizing capacity, values, and capacity
yeah,
of people.
yeah,
And something I'm holding because I tend to self agitate a lot. And it's part of my work to have more stress management with it within myself is like the energy leak is on my side of the street.
mm,
Like, so I at least have it's actually as crappy as it sounds. I actually have some agency there.
mhm,
If things would be better if that person changed, I have actually no power available to me there.
yeah,
But if it's like the energy leaks on my side of the street, it's how I'm thinking about this, it's how I'm forming an opinion about this person, it's how I'm making them wrong, all the things,
yeah,
I get that power back.
yes.
Right? Yeah.
So I'm appreciating your ability to be able to flip that and regaining the power. Because when I eat, when I think about just that, and I mean, not, I wouldn't say it's a simple flip, but when I think about just kind of like changing my
Hmm.
thought process and the empowerment that comes with that, that's everything. I mean, I literally feel different in my body. I feel different emotionally, I feel different physically, I feel different mentally. It's a game changer, right? And
Yeah.
yeah, and so um I want to hold on to that because that just feels really good, really good. And
Yeah.
so if we can, as we are going to the table tomorrow and communing and breaking bread with whoever we're breaking bread with, um, if we can go to the table with that in mind and that as your goal, right? Like your goal for the next 3 hours as I sit at this table with these people, or sometimes it's 6 hours, whatever it is. The reason we're laughing is because I shared with Vanessa yesterday that um, my maximum is about 3 hours. I've done longer, but I'm good at about 3 hours, and then I'm finished. Anyway, so but if we can go to the table where we're communing and breaking bread with those in whatever capacity, right? In whatever context that is, with that in mind, and if everyone did that, oh my God, it would change the world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm with you. I'm with you. And thank you for also bringing up, this is so juicy, the importance of knowing your social meter,
Yeah.
right? Like little coins that get put in a social meter, and it's like, okay, you've got about 2 hours.
Mm-hmm.
Like know thyself,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because there's a couple of things that I feel are all happening at the same time at that table or at that gathering is all the stuff you haven't said to people, alcohol, okay, people being weird, right? Everyone's a little uncomfortable,
Right.
maybe. We're all a little more socially awkward after the last 18 months.
Mm-hmm.
Let's be real, even us extroverts, right? Like, still a little awkward in real time with less practice.
Mm-hmm.
And us not speaking up for ourselves. Like, all of that's happening. So, know your social meter. I'd say mine is about 2 hours in a larger gathering before I'm a little bit of a caged animal and I just want to go home and have a cup of tea and take a bath and
Mm-hmm.
not be with people. Unless this has been interesting for me to see because I noticed it at your birthday, unless it's with people that are like hearted,
Yeah.
that I'm not in a little bit of fighting against
Mm-hmm.
feeling energetically,
Yeah.
then, it could be an all day thing. But it's the like, know that all those elements are happening, right? If you have a resentment and now you've had 3 glasses of wine and you stayed an hour too long and you ate the pie that isn't gluten free, like whatever,
Mm-hmm.
just be in some level of relational self-awareness to yourself and to others. Like take care of yourself,
Right.
right? Don't I've done the thing and I wouldn't do it now, but years ago of like staying longer, having one more glass, eating the thing I kind of didn't want to, and then just sort of being like, wow, why did I put all that on myself?
Yeah.
Right. And again, the primal wiring of sense of belonging is so strong. It's so powerful. So most of us are also having to work not against, but work with our wiring
Right.
that says like, oh, but I want to belong, but I want this to be joyful, but I want to, sit after and have coffee with
Right.
everybody and that, or fear of missing out, all the things. But I'm gonna say be realistic with yourself. That's probably I could get that tattooed on my arm, but like be realistic with yourself
Yes.
and what you can handle after maybe even 18 months of being cooped in the house and all of it.
All of it. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, the alcohol piece, you know, I'm glad that you mentioned that a little bit because since you and I have both done our own cleanses in the last while, and we're both I speak for myself. I have since, I mean, in the last 8 weeks, I think I've had I think I've had 3 cocktails, which is unusual for me. And I'm glad, like, I'm glad that I don't really, my ritual is different at 4:30, 5 o'clock these days. It just is, which I'm really grateful for. So, and we not only will be breaking bread, but we will be sharing, spirits with other people around the table. And there will be people who have made a choice, doing things differently, maybe cleaning up their physical body and not drinking, right? And so there's a lot to consider. There's a lot to be taking into account here.
Mhm.
And then there are people that are in recovery, and maybe in
Yes.
recovery for the first time in 18 and just decided, okay, in these last 18 months during the pandemic, even though the amount of alcohol that has been sold has really gone up, but I'm certain there are people that have decided, you know what, I really want to get clean and I want to do things differently, and so I'm going to start a program. I'm going to not drink or whatever. So so for the first time in 18 months, they're in this social situation where some people might be drinking. They're making the very clear distinction to not drink, to be sober, to be as aware as they can be, and then to deal with everything else going on around. That's a lot. It's a fucking lot. Wow is right.
Yeah,
Yes.
I hadn't even thought of that. Like someone who had maybe massaged holidays with family with alcohol,
Yeah.
who's now got to watch the whole thing without sort of a lubricant, a social lubricant, so to speak,
Yeah.
and that they might be tossed into some reality there.
Yeah.
Super important. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
There's something else. Oh my God, I might have lost it. It was in relation to, this is what I was thinking of. As families are coming together this holiday season, they might have certain protocols with the pandemic, let's say, and there might be people that are not invited
Right.
for their choices, their medical liberties.
Yeah.
Um, and I'm holding that too, right? That maybe you're in a family where they're being super strict about who can come and who can't, and you're not allowed to come for your choices. Um, as it relates, obviously, I'm talking about the injections, but that there are going to be people who are going to feel left out
Yeah.
for being true to themselves. And that's hard too.
That's really hard.
Yeah.
It's really hard because people are making people are making choices for their own reasons,
Mhm.
and it's no one's business. People are making choices because they're making their choices on whatever information that they have, whatever they feel is best for them. And yeah, even though the majority of the country has decided, to get the vaccine, to get the shot, not everyone has. And so I will say I know of at least, 5 or 6 people who have made the choice to not get it and are being rejected
Mhm.
by their own families, or have been very clearly, very directly told, you are not welcome. I mean, come on, you know? Um, yeah, it feels harsh to me. It feels
Yeah.
really harsh and very, very confronting, and not confronting in a good way.
And probably not being done in conversations that are healthy.
Yeah.
I think that's the piece, right? Somebody could say, "This is my home. Like this is to the best of my ability the way we're planning Thanksgiving or Christmas." And I get that that might make you feel really left out, or there's a lot of what's the right word? Maybe shaming's the right word. It feels extreme, but I don't think it is. Um,
I think in some cases it's probably shaming, not all of them, but I think in
Yeah.
some cases it is. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And so even those conversations could be had with love, right? Like, I love you. I kind of don't know what to do. There's 30 other people coming. I think this is the best choice for my household. Like, maybe we have you on Zoom, something.
Yeah.
I don't know the answer there. I
Yeah.
really don't. But I think we can do it more kindly. That I know for sure.
Yeah.
And that those people who have made different choices may have already weathered a barrage
Yeah.
of shaming and questions, and not even like from a genuine place of curiosity, but questions that are kind of indicting.
Yeah.
So just be aware, like, there's going to be people who are alone because of that, or at the very least, sort of taxed and exhausted
Yeah.
because of that. You know,
Yeah.
yeah, a lot there. It's really a lot there.
Yeah. There is a
Yeah.
lot. Yeah.
And that's not to negate the like true joy of, you know, seeing family and perhaps making the best of all of it,
Right.
right? I do feel like there are families who are genuinely happy to see each other, look forward to that time together. I still question if there's stuff that's lingering that's unspoken.
Mm,
How much of that is superficial relating?
mhm.
It's just where my mind goes.
Yeah.
If we're not being truthful in our relationships, how superficial might they be at
Yes.
holidays,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And sometimes being truthful isn't available.
Right.
That's the complexity of it.
Right.
Are you going to tell like 98-year-old grandma, stop being so racist? I don't know. Maybe not,
Right.
right?
Right.
It's your
Yeah.
call. So just our shared humanity of these complexities. And then on the other end, as an activist, it's like when I say happy Thanksgiving, I'm like, oh, I cringe at the colonialism,
I know.
and I cringe at what we're celebrating in a way, and the lack of our textbooks historically being accurate there, at least when I was growing up. I know people are fighting to change that, right? But there's a little bit of like my awareness on like there was a great deal of genocide in this country perpetrated by white, I'm going to call it white supremacists. They might have not
Sure.
considered themselves that, but some mentality of white supremacy
Sure.
was at play.
Right.
And then we're like, I like the whole idea of giving thanks and being deeply steeped in Thanksgiving and being grateful for everything. I want that every day. That's how I want to operate.
Mhm.
And there's a cringy factor as someone who's aware of economic disparity, racial disparities, um, the foundations of this country
Yeah.
being pretty violent. That I'm like, happy Thanksgiving, cringe. Like,
Yeah.
I'm working with that in myself of like, no, I want it to be this clean, beautiful.
Right.
I'm grateful for you. I'm thankful for you in my life, but almost making a clean cut from whence it came,
Right.
the holiday itself, right? Like, I don't know if anyone else is feeling that, but I can't help but be a little like, ugh, because I also know a lot of activists who are really aware, and Thanksgiving's not a positive
Right.
holiday.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, what I'm finding interesting and fascinating for myself is that because I don't see a lot of commercialism because I don't have television, I don't have magazines, so I see some of it, but I don't see a lot of it that people do. And so um and I also don't see what I'm gonna identify as very insulting decorations,
Fair.
you know?
Hmm.
And so there's a part of me that feels kind of removed from it. I feel a little bit removed from it, from the from the insulting part of Happy Thanksgiving, because I'm not I'm a very visual person. So if I don't see it, it's kind of like I hate to say this, but the truth is out of sight, out of mind. Um, and so I do, and it's not like I want to forget about it.
Mhm.
I'm always appreciating when it is brought to my attention because that is the truth. The truth sometimes is really, really ugly. And yet, you know, if we're going to, as Americans, if we're going to get to a place where we are really going to be Americans and embrace the country, then we need to really look at the history of the country, think about everyone and how everyone is affected by all the things
Mhm.
to get to a place where we can feel even remotely connected and remotely equal. And we're so far from not being equal. But to just to have the feeling of equality, we need to look much deeper. We have to. And I feel like I do think that I think that, you know, in school they're working on that. In schools they're working on that now. But I went to school 50 years ago. So I didn't know, you know, I didn't know any of this. And so I'm grateful to, you know, I'm grateful to our much more modern education, if you will, because it's not really modern. It's what we should have known a long time ago. But I'm grateful that they're learning what they're learning. Um, Finally, I want to say finally, because it's too important to just erase it or act like it didn't happen, or, you know,
Mhm.
consider those that are not like us that they don't exist, because they do, and they
Yeah.
matter.
Amen.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then celebrations feel more honest to me from that place.
Yes.
Like, wow, we came and we stole this land and we did all this stuff. I mean, this is where I think Western accountability is missing in a lot of places. And it's untrustworthy because it's missing. To say, like, oof, like how this place was founded, I don't feel good about that.
Yeah.
And we can still give thanks. And maybe there's reparations and maybe there's ways to make it up as as descendants that have a little bit more awareness.
Hmm.
It's okay.
Yeah.
You know, that's okay to me. I don't want to poo-poo the celebrations. Just
Yeah.
be like, let's
Right.
be honest about how this all came to be. I mean, I was in school maybe 22 years ago, 23 years ago, and my history books were all about the Patriots fighting off the British and getting help from the French. And like way far in the back, like 1% of the, you know, I'm giving you a visual, 1% of the frame was like, oh, and there was Indians.
Right.
And that's not congruent
No.
at all,
No.
right? But the again, like who writes the stories?
White men.
The winners, right?
Yeah.
Like
The right.
who writes the books, who writes the stories?
Right.
And that's problematic for a whole groups, like many groups of people.
Right.
So yeah, I'm glad that there is a dedication movement going on to say we need to be like honest about the lens we're looking through, and we can still celebrate that
Right.
we're grateful for the many blessings we have, but like let's be honest, they were built on the backs of others,
Yeah.
right? Like let's be humble about that.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And I want to add too that what would feel good to me is if, hang on, there's a siren.
I'm excited to hear this. What would feel good to you in this
Yeah, is if those who made the choice to eliminate the information and the history, if they would now come forth and make an apology and just say, you know what, we really messed up and we are sorry. And have it come from a very sincere place, That I can respect.
Mhm.
That I can get on board with, and that I'm like, I'll give a high five to. But without that, it's hard to get behind. We can say, okay, well, let's fix it and move on. But to fix it, I think step one in fixing it is apologizing for eliminating,
Mm.
denying what happened in history.
Well, that's step one. I mean, in transformational work, it's the same step one. Let's be honest about what's happened.
Yeah.
And from there, there can be a springboard or a launching pad into something different.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
Love that invitation. Mhm.
Yeah. Mm.
We're at the top of the hour almost.
We're almost at the top of the hour. Yeah.
Imagining you might have a chat pack because
I
the
I
ends are
do
at home.
I do have a chat pack question, and it's interesting because I don't, anyway. So I'm just thinking, like, as we sit around our respective tables, what might we talk about? So this question is, what do you think is the dullest topic to discuss?
I could be totally wrong about this. First thought, best thought, podiatry.
Oh my God. In a million years, I never would have thought you would have said that. That is hilarious.
I'm just thinking I'd be like, blah, 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 you know.
Oh my gosh. I immediately went to the weather.
Ah,
I'm
really?
like, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, because I think it's like the conversation is over in about 30 seconds.
Like the superficial weather versus like tides, currents,
Right,
turning. Okay.
exactly. I'm not talking about global warming. I'm talking about, like, so how do you feel about this 65-degree? I'm like, yeah. Anyway. Oh my goodness.
Oh my gosh, I love it. Hmm. Well, thank you for this time and for this just sweet friendsgiving across the miles. I love that we can do
Yeah,
this no matter where one of us is,
right. Yeah,
and that we could maybe illuminate some stuff that might be stirring up for people right now that they might not be able to name or have language for.
yeah.
There's a lot embedded in the next, what is it, 5 weeks, 6 weeks?
5, 6 weeks.
Yeah,
A lot happening. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. So be gentle with yourselves,
Yeah.
right? And say no when you need to, and work with that part of you that might feel like the bad guy, and just know that this has been an unusual 18 months. So you may not feel prepared to go into situations, and you may want to celebrate on your own. Like it's all good. It's all
Yeah.
good.
Yeah.
Mm.
Mm.
Thanks,
Thank you,
friend.
friend.
So grateful for you.
I'm grateful for you. Grateful
So
for
grateful
this.
for us.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah.
Mm.
So wait, I stopped the record. Wait, are we still?